Before I start, let me tell you something. If you ever feel like someone is watching you when no one's there, don't ignore it. That's how she finds you. It all started about 6 months ago. My name's Alex, and I've always been the kind of person who likes to explore abandoned places. You know, those old buildings that time forgot. They fascinate me. There's just something eerie yet beautiful about them. Like they're holding secrets too painful for anyone to remember. But trust me, after what happened at Willow Creek House, I'll never step foot in another one again. Willow Creek was an old Victorian house on the outskirts of town. It had been empty for decades, but everyone knew its reputation. People said strange things happened there. Lights flickered even though the electricity had been cut off years ago. Neighbors claimed they heard screams coming from inside late at night. And then there were the stories about her, the Black Lady Ghost. She'd supposedly haunt anyone brave or stupid enough to trespass on her property. Most people thought it was just local folklore, a way to scare kids away from sneaking into the woods. But I wasn't so sure. I decided to check it out myself. I mean, how bad could it be? So one Friday afternoon, armed with my camera and flashlight, I drove out to Willow Creek. When I got there, the house looked exactly as creepy as I imagined. The paint was peeling off the walls, windows were shattered, and vines crawled up the sides like skeletal fingers. It felt wrong somehow, like the house didn't want visitors. But I shrugged it off. I was here now. Might as well see if any of the rumors were true. As soon as I stepped through the front door, the air changed. It wasn't cold, not really. It was heavy, oppressive, like the house itself was breathing down my neck. I turned on my flashlight and swept the beam across the room. Dust motes floated lazily in the light, but beneath them, everything was decayed. Broken furniture lay scattered around, and cobwebs hung from the ceiling like curtains. Still, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. At least, not yet. I started exploring, filming as I went. Each creak of the floorboards echoed through the silence, making me jump more than once. Upstairs, I found a long hallway lined with doors. Most of them were locked or jammed shut, but one opened easily. Inside was a child's bedroom, or what used to be one. A rusted metal bed frame stood against the far wall, and faded wallpaper peeled away to reveal yellowed plaster underneath. On the floor, I noticed something odd, a trail of small handprints leading toward the closet. My heart skipped a beat. What the hell? I muttered under my breath. Against my better judgment, I followed the prints. The closer I got to the closet, the colder it became. By the time I reached the door, my breath was visible in the air. Slowly, I pushed it open. Inside was nothing but darkness. No shelves, no clothes, no toys, just emptiness. But as I shone my flashlight into the void, I saw something move, something fast. Before I could react, the door slammed shut behind me, trapping me in the tiny space. Panic surged through me as I fumbled with the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Then I heard it, a soft whisper, barely audible over the pounding of my own heartbeat. Leave. The voice was low and guttural, almost inhuman. It sent chills racing down my spine. Who's there? I called out, trying to sound braver than I felt. There was no answer, only the sound of faint sobbing echoing from somewhere deep within the house. Finally, after what felt like hours, the closet door creaked open. I stumbled out, gasping for air, and bolted back down the hallway. I didn't stop running until I was outside, leaning against my car, trying to calm myself down. Whatever was in that house, I wanted no part of it. But fate has a funny way of screwing with you. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those handprints, heard that voice. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of knocking at my bedroom window. At first, I thought it was just tree branches swaying in the wind. But when I looked, I froze. Standing outside was a figure, a woman dressed entirely in black, her face obscured by shadows. Her eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight, pouring into mine like she could see straight through me. I screamed and backed away from the window, but when I blinked, she was gone. Or so I thought. Over the next few days, weird things kept happening. Objects would go missing only to reappear in strange places. My reflection in mirrors sometimes looked off, like it wasn't quite me anymore. And then there were the dreams, always the same. I'd find myself back in Willow Creek House, walking down that endless hallway, drawn toward the child's bedroom. But this time, the closet door was wide open, and standing inside was the black lady. She'd reach out for me, her mouth stretched into an unnatural grin, and I'd wake up screaming. Desperate for answers, I visited the local library and dug up some old newspaper clippings about the house. Turns out, Willow Creek hadn't always been abandoned. Back in the 1950s, a family lived there, a mother, father, and their young daughter. One day, the mother disappeared without a trace. Some believed she'd run off with another man. Others whispered darker theories. Either way, the family left shortly afterward, leaving the house to rot. But the most chilling detail came from an interview with an elderly neighbor who'd lived nearby at the time. She claimed to have seen the mother wandering the property weeks after she vanished, her skin pale and her eyes hollow. She wasn't right, the neighbor said, like she'd lost her soul. By now, I was convinced the black lady was the missing mother, trapped between worlds and seeking revenge. But why had she targeted me? Was it because I'd trespassed in her home? Or was there something else? The final straw came last week. I was sitting alone in my apartment when the lights suddenly dimmed. The temperature dropped sharply, and I heard that same whisper from before. Only this time it wasn't coming from the shadows. It was right beside me. I turned slowly, dreading what I might see. And there she was. The black lady stood inches away, her form wavering like smoke. Her lips curled into a sinister smile as she raised a skeletal hand and pointed toward the window. Outside, looming in the distance, was Willow Creek House. She wants me to go back. I don't know what will happen if I refuse. But one thing's for certain. I can't escape her forever. Stay tuned for part 2, where I'll share what happened when I returned to the house. Because whatever you do, don't turn your back on the black lady. She's always watching. I didn't want to go back. I swear, I didn't. But she left me no choice. After that night in my apartment, the haunting intensified. Every shadow seemed alive. Every sound carried a sinister undertone. Her presence was everywhere, lingering in the corners of my vision, whispering in my ear when I tried to sleep. It was like she was inside my head, twisting my thoughts, until I couldn't think straight anymore. One evening I found myself standing outside Willow Creek House again, trembling but unable to leave. Something, or someone, had pulled me here against my will. The air smelled of damp wood and decay, and the moonlight cast long, jagged shadows across the overgrown yard. My flashlight flickered as I approached the front door, which hung slightly ajar, creaking softly in the breeze. "Why are you doing this?" I whispered into the darkness, half expecting an answer. None came, but I could feel her watching me. That oppressive weight in the atmosphere pressed down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. With shaking hands, I pushed the door open wider and stepped inside. The house felt different this time. Darker, more hostile, as if it knew I'd return not out of curiosity but out of fear. The floorboards groaned beneath my feet as I moved deeper into the hallway, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the suffocating blackness. I called out, my voice echoing unnaturally loud in the silence. "I'm here. What do you want from me?" There was no response, only the faint sound of footsteps coming from upstairs. They were slow, deliberate, each one sending a fresh wave of dread coursing through my veins. Against every instinct screaming at me to run, I followed the noise. At the top of the staircase, the hallway stretched before me like a gaping maw. The trail of tiny handprints was still there, leading toward the same child's bedroom where I'd encountered the closet. Except now, they weren't alone. Beside them were larger prints, impossibly dark and smudged, as though made by bare feet covered in soot. My stomach churned as I realized they belonged to her, the Black Lady. I reached the bedroom door and hesitated, gripping the flashlight so tightly my knuckles turned white. The sobbing I'd heard during my first visit was louder now, almost deafening. It sounded like a child crying for help, desperate and broken. Summoning what little courage I had left, I pushed the door open. The room hadn't changed much since my last visit, except for one horrifying detail. The closet door was wide open, revealing a figure hunched inside. At first glance, it looked like a woman cradling something in her arms, a bundle of fabric or maybe a doll. But as I stepped closer, the truth hit me like a punch to the gut. It wasn't a doll, it was a child. A lifeless, pale little girl with glassy eyes stared up at me, her body limp in the Black Lady's grasp. Her skin was deathly cold, her lips blue, and then I saw the bruises, ugly purple marks circling her neck like fingerprints. "No," I choked out, stumbling backward. "What did you do?" The Black Lady slowly lifted her head, her glowing eyes locking onto mine. For the first time, I saw her face clearly. It was gaunt and hollow, her features twisted into an expression of pure rage and sorrow. Tears streamed down her cheeks, leaving streaks of ash in their wake. She opened her mouth to speak, her voice low and guttural, vibrating in my bones. She wouldn't stop crying, she hissed, clutching the dead child tighter. She wouldn't stop screaming. So I made her quiet. My legs gave out beneath me, and I collapsed to the floor, frozen in terror. This wasn't just some angry spirit seeking revenge. It was a mother driven mad by grief and guilt. Her daughter's cries had driven her to commit the unthinkable, and now she was trapped in this nightmare, reliving it over and over. But that wasn't all. As I sat there paralyzed, the Black Lady rose to her full height, towering over me. In one swift motion, she tossed the child's body aside like a rag doll and lunged forward. Her icy fingers wrapped around my throat, lifting me off the ground with supernatural strength. I clawed at her hands, gasping for air, but it was useless. She leaned in close, her breath reeking of earth and rot. "You shouldn't have come back," she snarled, her voice dripping with malice. "Now you'll stay with us forever." Pain exploded in my skull as she slammed me against the wall. My vision blurred, and the world spun violently. Through the haze, I saw her dragging me toward the open closet. Inside, the walls seemed to stretch infinitely, swallowing light and sound alike. Shadows writhed and twisted, forming grotesque shapes that reached out for me. No, I screamed, thrashing wildly. But the black lady was relentless. With one final shove, she forced me into the abyss, slamming the door shut behind us. Darkness consumed everything. When I woke up, I was lying on the floor of the child's bedroom. The sun was rising outside, casting golden rays through the broken window. For a moment, I thought it had all been a dream. Then I noticed the handprints on the floor, fresh ones leading back to the closet. And when I looked in the mirror later that day, I saw her standing behind me, her hollow eyes staring into my soul. The black lady doesn't let anyone leave. If you're still watching, turn off your lights and look in the mirror. Is anyone standing behind you?